Today, we're looking at a red ink by Kyo Iro, Flaming Red of Fushime. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps in the description down below, so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I do fountain pen ink reviews every single day, so I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Platinum 3776 with a broad nib, used it to write for a day and to take my notes for this video. This first writing sample is done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper in order to have some kind of standardization to look at. There's additional writing samples later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to make sure I keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some shading in spots where it looks like it kind of wants to go away, like the M in flaming, the bottom of the F in of. So I guess it has some shading. The extra fine is lighter than the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer quite a bit of shading. Quick starts darker, gets lighter, gets much darker. Brown starts dark, works its way lighter. Fox starts dark, gets light, gets dark again. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, slightly lighter than the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some shading. Not all the time, but sometimes. Like brown starts dark, gets light. Fox is dark to light to dark, but quick is just a solid dark tone. So shading can happen here. It took 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine does show some color variation, looking far left to far right. The medium shows none, although we did see color variation in both of the writings. The 1.1, Tomoe River, no bleeding, really very little Tomoe River ghosting. There is some, but I think you could comfortably use the back of the page. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The medium is darker than the extra fine, but not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect any, and we didn't get any. Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, some nice shading spots that go on, like brown starts dark, works its way light. Lazy starts darker, works its way lighter. Dry starts darker, works its way lighter. So we do get a bunch of shading spots, 7 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, just a tone lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. 10 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine, far left to far right, shows some color variation. The medium shows none, and that's what we got in the writing. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is this is a true prime red. It starts much lighter and watered down and gets darker as it moves up, but it's pretty much running away from the water. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And we really see no difference between these two chromatographies, which makes me feel there's going to be no real hold on for this ink. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it does really what I would expect based on that chromatography. It blows out, it blooms in all different directions, it feathers, it's gross, but it is actually readable. But I would not use this based on I think I would lose a whole bunch of stuff. Now water is reactivating and starting to lift it. It is not lifted it off the page, but I do think that given a little more time based on the chromatography and
I can see the dot pad coming through. But if it didn't do enough, pen flush will definitely do all that it takes. I'm starting to see the white of the paper come through, which means with more than 30 seconds, that's all it would do. It would go away with the flush. The 1/3 bleach solution does completely obliterate it, but there's no need to use that to get this out of your pen.
I test for viscosity or flow using a thing called a tilt test. I will link how I do that, the video of it, down below or up in the cards. I also then put it onto a standard distribution so it's more easily seen with all of the inks that I've tested. Now, for the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9.
Kyo Iro Flaming Red of Fushime has a viscosity of 1.95, making this a wetter ink.
To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples, and for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds.
Kyo Iro Flaming Red of Fushime has an average dry time of 9 seconds, making this a pretty darn fast drying ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Kyo Iro's Flaming Red of Fushime, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a nice turquoise, Diamine Marine.
The second writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia, Levenger, and white lines paper.
Here we have the yellow Rhodia, where we're not looking at it so much as a performance issue as what happens to the tone of this ink when it's given a yellow backdrop. And it's very interesting because while this is not a very opaque ink because we can see the lines through some of the writing, the tone is absolutely unchanged in all three forms for having a yellow backdrop. But the scrubbies are changed ever so slightly. Only the scrubbies, but none of the writing. You don't always get change for yellow paper. Levenger paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub. With no feather spread, halo sheen, it does offer some shading spots, like the K in quick is darker, the B in brown is darker, the word the is darker, the E in over, much darker, the PS in jumps, much darker. So it is there, and it does come through at times. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine, about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, although we do get some with the extra fine. And last up is white lines. And it performed very well with no bleeding and no ghosting, and it's not really made for fountain pen ink. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen or shade. The extra fine is a little lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. Medium's darker than the extra fine, same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows no color variation. We didn't expect it, we didn't get it, and that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Kyo Iro's Flaming Red of Fushime? This is too light a red for me. Often when writing, it made me feel as though my pen was writing out of ink, just because the tone itself was that light. Now, that's my perspective on the color. If you like lighter reds, this is going to be a very good red for you. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? Because of its lighter tone, I found that a very wet fine put down enough to really bring out the color so that I can enjoy this ink. I do new ink reviews every single day, so if you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.